thinking about what I mentioned before, pandiculation and stretching. So thinking about how stretching is like this buzzword in common language. You know, if you don't know anything about, you haven't studied the books on health or whatever, you're not an expert, but you would tell someone that's in pain, well, have you tried stretching, right? So people know about stretching, and in clinical somatics, we know that, you know, you would tell your clients, you know, don't stretch, we want to pandiculate. Right. And so the question I have is, how would you explain to someone that pandiculation encompasses what people think that stretching will do for them?
That's right. That's a good question. This is different than stretching. There's reasons anatomically why stretching is not ideal, but what we deeply desire is to feel at ease in our bodies, okay? Now, we can change length with stretching, and if you need to be in the circus, you can. And Hanna, when he died, Thomas Hanna, who came up with this, he was maybe 65 or 70, I'm not sure, but he could put his leg behind his head. He was a very flexible guy. I can't. But what we desire is to feel at ease in our bodies. And stretching can give you more length, but it doesn't give the brain the feedback it needs to say, well, I'm not going to hold you tense all the time. People who stretch a lot, they're still tense. So my experience, if you go in and say, well, what's the experience of stretching? As that arm reaches and comes back to its limit, you can push it, and you know it's stretching, but you actually, if you go into that place, it's hard to feel that length change. There's not an experience of the length changing, except that you sort of have an idea of where your hand is, and it seems to go further. So stretching, the limit in a stretch is caused by the spinal cord. When the spinal cord senses those stretchy sensations that we feel, it says stop. It doesn't want the muscle to go further, and you can override that and run the risk of a stretching injury. But pandiculation, this contraction and then a lengthening, is different than a stretch. The contraction gives its pleasurable sensation, like a yawn. We can have that yawning sensation. It lights up to the brain saying, oh, I know that place. It lights up your sensory motor cortex. It says, okay, that place is on the map. I have my awareness there, and then that slow lengthening, if you go slow enough in direct your awareness in so carefully that your sensory motor system can take in that information, because it's so unusual to be present in the experience of feeling something open and lengthening that the brain can't do it as fast as you can open. That's why we're going slow. We're saying, how do we get the brain to have such a vivid experience of this openness, of this lengthening, that then it says, oh, I get it. I can easily be that open. I don't need the opposing muscle to pull, or I don't need to open into a doorway and stretch, 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 when the brain really wants to just go back to the habit of saying, well, but I want it here. Why are you pushing me open? That's an emergency. I want to hold it here. Well, by closing up, then by making it active, then we're saying, well, you've done more of the tension that's already there. It's voluntary at that point. And then by opening very slow, by being present in that space, your brain can understand, well, oh, it can turn that off. Mm-hmm. Well, we've learned to enjoy that feeling of stretching. Like feel the burn. Mm. But you don't see cats lie out, like force themselves open and hold that open. No, it's a pandiculation. It's this contraction followed by a slow relax. And in somatics, I'm interested in how do we optimize pandiculation. And I believe there's certain speeds to open that are slow enough that the brain can have this, what's the most complete learning? How do we direct our awareness to have the most powerful change in the possibilities? Because we have this anatomy, and that's our possibilities. But how do we get the brain to learn the potential that we have? And it has to be in the in the language that it can accept.
So if I were just to try to summarize
Yeah.
and we were to put ourselves in the moment of somebody telling me, well, you should be really doing a stretch here, could I say to them, from what I'm hearing you say, is like, well, actually, or I would say like, well, yes, I definitely do need to do some work here, say like with my pecs and my traps, but rather instead of stretching, I would do a pandiculation. Now, this isn't something I would kind of try to explain like, okay, it's not like we're throwing stretching out the window. Instead, we're adding a contraction and a slow release, and I would just maybe try to say like doing it in this fuller way with adding the contraction and doing it slower. It's not like we're getting rid of what we think a stretching will do to us. Like, it's still going to happen.
Yeah, well, so the real change is the perspective. Like, it's easy for us to look at ourselves from the outside, and people often do their yoga from the outside. But what this is, well, you can bring the somatic experience to your stretching. You can bring the somatic experience to your yoga. How do you do it from the inside completely? How rich an experience would that be? So we're changing the perspective. Can you be present with your internal experience? And what these lessons do that I take people through, I guide you to where I know it's probably difficult to be present in your internal experience in those patterns of movement, because we get stuck in certain ways as humans that are quite typical, but there's an infinity of possibilities for how we can get stuck. But how do we learn to value our internal experience and reconnect to the ways that we've lost our experience? How do we reconnect back to sensing our bodies again?